So let's talk a little bit about the most surprising race last night in the 49th Congressional District. Darrell Issa, incumbent. Easy challenges in years past, but not so much last night. What happened?
Yeah, this is a race that no one was focused on, maybe not even Congressman Issa, but like many California Republicans, he didn't do nearly as well as expected, and looks like he may face a tight race in November, although there's a district where Republicans have about an 8 percentage point lead. But I think it was the combination of two things. One, being associated with Donald Trump, being in the party of Donald Trump, being an endorser of Donald Trump may have pulled him down, especially in a district that has a lot of Latino voters. And secondly, with Donald Trump showing up the Republican race, there wasn't that push to get Republicans to the polls, and that would have helped Congressman Issa.
So it might have been an anomaly linked to the primary itself.
This was a much bluer primary electorate than we've seen in years past in California because this was the center of the world for the Democrats. Didn't bring a lot of Republicans to the polls. I think things could look very different in November.
That said, there was a good night for Republicans in the city of San Diego. Kevin Faulconer won outright.
Yeah, so Kevin Faulconer's big win, getting well over the 50% hurdle, I think shows, first of all, that voters are very satisfied with what he's done in his bipartisan leadership, but I think it also shows that, with all the scandals we've had in City Hall, with the pensions, with this sexual harassment, if you just don't screw things up and steer the ship steady, you've got a pretty good chance. I think voters were just relieved to have a mayor that they could get behind.
Somebody who was competent, someone who represented himself well.
And someone who didn't draw a top-tier challenger. There are a lot of big-time Democrats who stayed out of this race because they didn't think they had a good shot at winning, and this was, in the end, a cakewalk for Mayor Faulconer.
He did it in a city that has an edge in Democrats. Democrats have been picking up some voter registration gains, not just in the city of San Diego, but the rest of the county as well. What's going on there?
Well, there's been a big surge with all the interest in this year's Democratic race, and also with the ways that the state has made it easier to register to vote. So you can register online, and this is bringing a younger electorate, a newer electorate that could transform California politics. But this was Bernie Sanders' hope, that these new voters were going to give him the primary, and that didn't happen. Turnout wasn't quite as high as anyone thought. So getting people registered is one thing, dragging them out to the polls is another.
A big race for the Democrats to focus on was that presidential primary. It probably helped a lot of the down ticket races as well. But it wasn't as close as some of the polls indicated. And when I looked at the electoral map, I saw Clinton winning in all the big population centers and Bernie's strength actually being in some of the more rural areas.
Absolutely. Well, if you looked at the polling numbers, there were two figures. Hillary Clinton was leading Bernie Sanders by a lot among Democratic registered voters, and Bernie Sanders was narrowing that margin if you looked at the lead that included independents, no party preference voters. But those voters had to know to ask for a Democratic primary ballot when they walked into a polling place, or had to know about a month ago or earlier when they asked for an absentee ballot. And those voters didn't show up, didn't get into the Democratic primary when they did show up, and Bernie Sanders' campaign is effectively over, and Hillary Clinton's the presumptive nominee because of that.
Now, it was a good night for women in the state of California. We look at the U.S. Senate race with Kamala Harris, Loretta Sanchez, two women, Democrats both, who are running now to fill Barbara Boxer's seat.
Yeah, so Barbara Boxer in 1992, elected in the year of the woman that brought two senators from the same state for the first time. Now, not only will she be replaced by another woman, but a woman of color. So Loretta Sanchez or Kamala Harris bring, actually between them, three different ethnicities to this U.S. Senate race. And so this is part of the transformation of American politics. It's looking a lot different than it did 30 or 40 years ago.
UCSD political science professor Thad Kousser. Thad, thanks very much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.